the best place in outer space. Kids Planet!
Are you ready to join in the fun? I'm Nova, and
today we'll travel on the hands of time to worlds beyond our own, with a compass and a rhyme to learn of people yet unknown. So many big events to learn, to see, to understand. You've only to trust in me as we travel land to land. Fasten your seatbelts because we are taking off in 3, 2, 1.
here we go!
We're going to take an epic adventure today. There are many worlds to see in every part of the galaxy, and in the earth and deep oceans. But today, we're traveling through time. We will be traveling to many important time periods. And that's a very long way to go. To get us there, old grandfather clock will help us. We just step inside and... Wait! We can't leave without my good friend Curious. I'm positive we're going to need him on this long and informative trip. Curious! Let's go! We're traveling back in time 2,500 years to our first stop. Ancient Greece. Greece is a country nestled between Albania and Turkey, near the Mediterranean Sea. Curious, what is ancient Greece known for? It is known to be the birthplace of philosophy and the sciences like astronomy. It was also the birthplace of the Olympics. The first Olympics ever were held here almost 2,000 years ago, with events that tested who the best athlete in each game was. The type of events held back then, a lot like the ones today, were in running, long jump, javelin, boxing, and horseback riding events. Wow, fascinating! Can you believe that the Olympics have been going on that long? Curious, that's amazing. Is there more? The Greeks invented a type of government called democracy, which means ruled by people. A lot of countries today use that same type of government. Athens, a city in Greece, was the first city in the world to have a democratic government. The leaders created a list of rules called a constitution. And everyone was allowed to vote and help make decisions about how the city was going to be run. Curious, I've heard that ancient Greece was famous for many creative things too. How about theater, music, art, poetry? I knew it! A poet named Homer wrote the Odyssey in ancient Greece, which was a fantastic story about a man named Odysseus who goes away to war and has a long journey home, during which he gets sidetracked by some beautiful singers called sirens and a one-eyed monster named the Cyclops. It's a very famous and very incredible story. Ancient Greeks, like Aristophanes, made wonderful theatrical pieces. And the Greeks were also famous for their sculptures of gods and goddesses, as well as for their beautiful architecture. The Greeks always wanted to do their best at everything they tried, and they loved all things beautiful and artistic. That's why their art, their government, and their striving to learn about the world and philosophy was so important and so great. We also always try our best too, don't we, kids planet travelers? Sometimes good things don't last forever. And eventually, the Greeks were conquered by the Romans. The Romans were also very interested in excellence and ruled whole parts of the world until they were also conquered right before the Middle Ages. Some call it the Dark Ages because the world lost a lot of the knowledge that the Greeks and Romans had pulled together about the world, science, and industry. It was still an eventful time with important milestones. So let's head there when we come back. But first, it's time for a Nova quiz. In the Middle Ages, there was a very famous king. You might have heard of him being associated with Robin Hood, who was the heroic king and big brother to a rather naughty prince. His name was A. Leonard the Ant Fighter. B. Sebastian the Scaredy Cat. C. Richard the Lion-Hearted. See if you can come up with the answer. Don't go away. We'll be right back with Kids Planet! Welcome back to Kids Planet! Ready to have some more fun? Me too! Let's learn the answer to our Nova quiz. Remember the question? In the Middle Ages, who was the heroic king and big brother to a rather naughty prince? Was it A. Leonard the Ant Fighter? B. Sebastian the Scaredy Cat? C. Richard the Lion-Hearted? If you said C. Richard the Lion-Hearted, you're right. King Richard was an important figure of the Middle Ages because... Curious, I think we need your help. Why was King Richard an important figure in the Middle Ages? Oh, yes! The Magna Carta was invented during his time. While King Richard of England was at war, his brother John took over his kingdom. He was not very nice, and the people were ready to rebel against him. The Magna Carta was created over 800 years ago so that the king would never again have total power over the people. And the people were happy. There were many wars during the Middle Ages and sickness. Many people fell ill with something called the plague. It was indeed a dark time in the history of the world. But there was some wonderful art and culture during that time as well. Sculptures, stained glass, paintings, and beautiful literature. An epic story about a hero named Beowulf was written in England. The Travels of Marco Polo was written by Marco Polo of his travels to China. Very few books were written by people other than priests, because very few others could read or write. Can you imagine not being able to read your favorite book? As time went on, more artists started making their paintings more realistic. More people were becoming educated, and suddenly it was the Renaissance period. The what? The Renaissance. I know that Renaissance means something very special, but I can't think of it. My mom is always saying that my dad is a Renaissance man, but I have no idea what that means. Curious, can you tell us what Renaissance means? Renaissance means rebirth. So the world was reawakening, coming to life again after the Dark or Middle Ages? But how does that make my dad a Renaissance man? So many of the artists back in the Renaissance were talented at so many things. Da Vinci would paint, sculpt. He was a scientist and an inventor. Michelangelo was a sculptor, painter, and architect. We use the phrase Renaissance man today as a way of saying that someone is good at many things. I bet you're good at lots of things. Can you think of some? Anyway, the Renaissance started in Italy, and then King Francis of France helped keep the Renaissance movement going throughout the world. I think we should create a planet list about the Renaissance period. Don't you? Here are some of the biggest achievements and events from the Renaissance period. 1. The printing press. It was invented by a man named Johann Gutenberg. Before the printing press, people had to write books completely by hand. Can you imagine your favorite book being written by hand? If I wanted my best friend Galaxy to have a copy of my favorite book, I'd have to hand copy it for her. Whoa! 2. The Mona Lisa and the Last Supper. Leonardo da Vinci was one of the most creative artists and inventors of this time period. He painted the famous Mona Lisa and the Last Supper. He also invented many things that we still use today, like the hydraulic drill, a drill that cuts into the earth using water to power it, the helicopter, and an armored tank. Of course, some of those things didn't work the way they do today. But it was his designs that got everything started. That's amazing! 3. Ferdinand Magellan. Ferdinand Magellan and countless other explorers set out on ships across oceans to find new worlds. 4. Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, and Macbeth by William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare wrote enough plays to fill a giant Bible. He wrote Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, and Macbeth, and built the Globe Theatre in London, England. 5. The moons of Jupiter. A scientist named Galileo discovered the moons of Jupiter using a telescope and a lot of patience. As you can tell, the Renaissance period was full of invention, literature, art, and a whole new appreciation for learning. It marked a period in the world when the people were more focused on learning and art than on fighting. When we come back, we'll be traveling to the Baroque period. Don't worry, Curious will help us figure out what that was. But first, it's time for another Nova quiz. The Baroque period was known for its fashions. Can you name the special fashion worn during this time? A. Big hats made of cookies. B. Shoes on the wrong feet. C. Long curly wigs. see if you can think of the answer. We're going to make Baroque purple durple polka dotted super smoothies now with extra fluffy whipped cream and sparkly sprinkles. Don't go away. We'll be right back with more Kids Planet. We're back. Let's continue our incredible adventure on Kids Planet. Time for the answer to our Nova quiz. Remember the question? Can you name the special fashion worn on the head during the Baroque period? Was it A, big hats made of cookies? B, shoes on the wrong feet? C, long curly wigs? Yes, C, long curly wigs. You're right. The Baroque period was a time of being extravagantly dressed. Extravagantly means fancy. From dresses to hair, everything was very, very fancy. All things had a lot of decoration. Some women even wore fake birds in their hair. Baroque art was a very ornamented... Wait, what does ornamented mean? That's a pretty big word. I see. Let's make that our big word of the day. Ornamented. It means to make something look more decorative. One time, Galaxy and I put ribbons all over my bedroom to see if we could make it look fancier. It worked. There were ribbons on everything from lamps. And one special blue one for my cat Astro. Also, in the Baroque period, people loved opera. Opera is a play put to music. Operas first started being played to private audiences, but were soon so popular that they played for the public. Wonderful musicians like Handel, Bach, and Vivaldi took the world by storm with their beautiful, fancy creations. Baroque was one of the greatest eras in the history of Spanish literature and writers, like playwright Lope de Vega, poet Juana Inés de la Cruz, and Miguel de Cervantes, who is known as the first novelist. Oh, of course, I almost forgot, Curious. Isaac Newton. When people think of Isaac Newton, they think of the man who got bonked on the head by an apple, and that's how he discovered gravity. What's gravity? Curious, can you help us here? Gravity is a force which pulls two objects toward each other. It's what keeps us on the Earth and makes objects fall. So, Isaac Newton discovered gravity, which led to many more amazing discoveries and ideas. Wow! We are going to have to travel back to our own time period soon. I know our parents must be missing us. But first, let's review what we've learned today. We traveled to ancient Greece, birthplace of the Olympics, democracy, and epic theater. We learned the Greeks worked to be the best they could be. The Greeks were eventually taken over by the Romans, and the Romans were taken over by the Franks, and that's when we went into the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages are also known as the Dark Ages because so much information was lost. The Magna Carta was created to protect the people. Soon, the Renaissance took over. Renaissance means what? Do you remember? Renaissance means rebirth. It was a reawakening. It's like people woke up and remembered that we had to make the world an excellent place to live. From that era, we got amazing inventions like the printing press, works of art from incredible artists like Leonardo da Vinci, And discoveries like Galileo discovering the moons of Jupiter. Then we traveled forward to the Baroque period. In the Baroque period, we learned our big word of the day, ornamented. It means to make something more decorative, like the ribbons that Galaxy and I put all over my room. And the cat. The Baroque period was famous for its operas, explorers, musicians, and Isaac Newton. It was a fun time where people ventured to new worlds and music soared to new heights. We understand from these time periods that the world keeps going forward. These ancient times give us new ideas while they remind us where we came from. We know that the things created in those days have helped our lives be easier. And we also know that our lives may help the lives of others in the way distant future. Maybe we'll explore together. Before we end today's mission, we have to make a quick stop for our interplanet trivia. And we're going to need some help. Why don't we call my mom? Yay, Mom! You're here! We learned a ton about time travel today. We learned that there are many important time periods that have helped shape the world we live in today. From ancient Greece to the Baroque era, everything in our past has affected our world and our future. Thanks to the inventions and ideas that came from people like Galileo, Shakespeare, and Newton, we've been able to change and better our society. All right, now that we've reviewed, let's test our knowledge. Do you think you can help my mom figure out which one of these ideas came from an ancient time period? Is it this? A type of government that lets the people rule and vote while implementing a constitution. A lot of countries today use this same type of government. Or is it this? The Magna Carta, which makes sure that the king will never have total power over his people. It was created about 800 years ago. Or could it be this? A machine that allowed people to make many book copies. After this was invented, people didn't have to copy books by hand anymore. Think about what we learned today. Do you think you know the answer? Well, democracy was invented in ancient Greece, which is the basis for a lot of the governments that we see today. The Magna Carta was created during the Middle Ages. It made sure that the people still had rights and the king couldn't do whatever he wanted. And the printing press was a Renaissance invention, making it easier for books to be copied. This invention helped so much that it's still used in modern times. So, we have ancient Greece, the Middle Ages, and the Renaissance. That means all of the options are correct. Great job! From these time periods, we've learned that we can move forward without forgetting where we came from. We know that the things created in those ancient times have helped our lives become easier, and that we can also create inventions that can help future generations too. Way to go! You did it again! We have to be getting into our clock and back to our own time now. My mom is making smoothies for snack. So now it's time to say goodbye. But don't be sad, because we'll see each other again soon, right here in the best place in outer space. Kids Planet! See you next time!